Hello?
Good morning, Chirag.
Everybody, welcome to the Board of Administration meeting. And our first order of business, of course, is roll call.
Teresa Taylor.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Deborah Gallegos for Malia Cohen. Frank Ruffino for Fiona Ma.
Present.
Lisa Middleton.
Present.
Nicole Griffith for Reina Ortega. Here. Jose Luis Pacheco.
Present.
Kevin Palkey.
Good morning.
Ramon Rubalcaba.
Present.
Yvonne Walker.
Excused.
Melissa Willette. Dr. Gail Willis.
Excused. All right, thank you. Our next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I have asked Jose Luis Pacheco to lead us in the pledge. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Pacheco. So good morning, everybody, and again, welcome. March is Women's History Month, and a little over a week ago, we celebrated International Women's Day. And I just wanted to say, I mentioned this last year, and I think it is worth repeating. I'm proud to serve on this board that consists of a majority of women. I'm proud that this organization is led by a woman. And I'm proud of all the women at CalPERS whose contributions every day make our organization a better place. Thank you for everything you do. This year's theme for Women's History Month is Women Who Advocate for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. We must all work to ensure a positive future for all and acknowledge that bias and discrimination must be eliminated from our lives and our institutions. It is women's current lived experience, whether black, brown, white, that we are all being discriminated against since this landmark decision to overturn Roe versus Wade by this Supreme Court. States all over the country have proven what we taught our daughters and what our mothers taught us from the last time we fought for reproductive rights. Once we lose those rights, we will become second-class citizens. Every time I open my email or the news, there's another horror story of a woman who just needed life-saving medical care to be told that her life doesn't matter and that the state has decided you must wait until you are almost dead before receiving the needed life-saving abortion care, or, regular medical care. These decisions are being made by men with no medical degrees, by state legislators who have decided that women's rights and freedoms do not matter. Let's remember, on its way to the Supreme Court is an appeal to outlaw medical abortion pills, and under consideration in several states is the outlawing of contraception. International Women's Day and Women's History Month in the United States reminds us to celebrate our achievements as women, but also to remember we must continue to fight for our rights every single day. I'd like now to turn to the topic of ESG, or more precisely, the anti-ESG movement. I have the privilege of serving on the board of the International Corporate Governance Network. CalPERS was one of the founding members of the network, and its membership today includes investors representing more than $77 trillion in assets. ICGN works to advance the highest standards of corporate governance and investor stewardship worldwide in pursuit of long-term value creation. Last week, we met in Washington, D.C., and I had the opportunity to address the group, and this is what I told them. For CalPERS, how well we measure risk and climate risk is at the heart of providing retirement benefits to our members. But lately, one of the biggest risks has been the risk caused by misinformation when it comes to the issue of sustainable investments. The facts speak for themselves. According to the Pew Charitable Trust, 14 U.S. states have adopted laws discouraging ESG considerations, or in some cases, even banning ties to financial companies that do so. Most of this state legislation has focused on public pension investments. Several states that have proposed but not passed ESG-related legislation, such as Arizona and Missouri, have seen lawmakers reintroduce those bills this year. And in California, we still face legislation that would require the state's pension systems to divest from fossil fuels. As president of the CalPERS board, let me be clear. We are fully committed to actively managing climate risks to preserve long-term value for our members in line with our fiduciary duties. I share those words with you because I want our members, employers, and stakeholders to know that this board is in full support of our climate work. It is part of the fabric of our investment analysis, and we will continue to work with like-minded investors to educate and advocate on the importance of a sustainable investing. And I do know Marcy will have more to say about this in her report. So now I want to bring your attention to our self-assessment. It's scheduled this morning. We conduct this exercise every 2 years in accordance with our governance policy. And the most recent assessment was completed in the fall and facilitated by the National Association of Corporate Directors. The assessment centers around 5 core governance competencies: board structure, operational oversight, CEO succession, strategy oversight, and risk management oversight. Based on this year's assessment, 3 priorities did emerge that we will focus on over the next 2 years. So those are leadership, development, and education, increased focus on strategy, both short and long term, and executive management succession planning. We do have a time certain for this discussion at 10 a.m., and we welcome you folks to attend and listen. So finally, I'd like to address a friend of mine. I'd like to take a personal privilege to recognize and honor the life of Neil Johnson of SEIU Local 1000. We learned last week that Neil passed away, and our hearts go out to his family and the Local 1000 family. Neil was a regular fixture at our board meetings, always providing his words of wisdom during public comment. Neil knew how to disagree with us with politeness while also making great counterpoints. He served SEIU Local 1000 with distinction and was a strong advocate for public employees. Neil started his state career before state workers had the right to organize, before the Dills Act was passed. He had an over 40-year career with the state of California and in service to SEIU Local 1000 to our members as a steward and a bargaining unit representative, and served at the bargaining table during a huge amount of cycles. I can't even give you the number. Neil was the beating heart of our union as he, along with others, saw us through so many very difficult times. Neil was also our institutional knowledge of everything SEIU Local 1000, its history, how it started, why even the bylaws and policy files were written the way they were written. Neil attended every CalPERS board meeting even before I was on the board, and his depth and breadth of knowledge of our healthcare program was inexhaustible. He will be sorely missed. He was my friend. We thank him for his many contributions. And wish his family the very best. That concludes my report.
Thank you, President Taylor. On behalf of our team as well, we'll certainly miss Neil. He was a very active stakeholder, shared a lot of his wisdom and experience as we were contemplating really key decisions for the fund. And so that voice being silenced will definitely be missed by us as well. So I thought today I did modify my comments a bit after our discussions, particularly on Monday. So during Monday's investment committee, we did discuss the importance of Climate Action 100 and really the perseverance it takes to stay engaged with companies whose emissions really pose risks to long-term investments. Perseverance to require transparency in how these companies are managing their risks related to climate. We're talking a lot about climate, but there are risks related to human capital, and there are certainly risks to governance, and these are highly correlated. After all, this is our capital. We are investing in these companies. We are an active owner, and that is just a part of meeting the fiduciary duty that you all have and many of us have as well. As we have seen, there are company CEOs who basically have been leaders in energy transition who are no longer in those roles, simply, in my opinion, because they attempted to acquire new assets to ensure a just energy transition. Bloomberg's reporting recently, and I believe that was this week or over the weekend, the headline, "The Exxon chief goes on the offensive as Wall Street sours on ESG," I think really documents this appropriately and how important it is to stay as a collective. CalPERS has been a longstanding leader in efforts to understand long-term risks and convening like-minded investors to really share in a collective voice. It's obvious to me, and I think to President Taylor, based on her comments, that we will need to step up our efforts in being a counterbalance to political headwinds. And I think Chair Miller, Chair of the Investment Committee Miller, you did a really nice job explaining the need for that counterbalance. Our international counterparts remain committed to engagement and transparency. Significant progress has been made in light of a lot of the negative news stories more recently. We've seen regulators across the globe creating new standards, new transparency. Our own SEC finalized rules on Scope 1 and Scope 2, and they will also work through several challenges that we certainly have seen at CalPERS. We respect the work, and we also provided comment during the open period. Our advice is now is not the time to step away as an active owner. Regardless of the pressure to do so, we did release our Sustainable Investing 2030 plan. And as you know, we're invited to participate in a joint informational hearing with the legislature that was scheduled on March 13th. Unfortunately, that informational hearing was canceled. What I thought I would do for the remainder of my CEO report is to share with you the comments that we were planning on making. We really do see this as a missed opportunity to tell our story and to really share the plan. We do understand that the divestment bill is still active, but we wanted to give, again, a counterpoint, give the plan that CalPERS is working on. As a long-term investor, we have a much longer time horizon than, say, a particular legislator. And so we would start by saying that we're underscoring that urgency that we all feel when it comes to climate change, and most of my comments will be around climate change. We know that 2024 is already on a dangerous path with the hottest January on record, and 2023 was the warmest year since at least 1850. Climate scientists tell us the world has reached a tipping point in the fight against these alarming trends. Fortunately, a different tipping point has also emerged, the opportunity to make large, meaningful investments in climate solutions. Last year, worldwide climate investments totaled some $1.7 trillion. That's half the size of California's entire GDP. But even that still does not fully meet the need. Analysts believe the need is nearly double that amount at more than $3 trillion per year. That translates into enormous investment opportunities for large pools of capital like CalPERS. Last November, we did announce our $100 billion climate action plan, which is really a significant new chapter in the pension funds, our fund's long-stated goal to move our portfolio to net zero by 2050. This is a commitment that we made several years ago. As I said, we see a wide array of opportunities, ones that meet our goals for generating excess returns above our benchmark targets. And we do believe that there are investments in the state of California as we look at new innovation also. So first, CalPERS ended 2023 with more than $47 billion in climate investments. These investments are largely found in our public equity and real estate portfolios. They include investments in renewable energy, sustainable packaging, which is a real burden on climate and water in particular, electric vehicles, and green buildings. Last fall, we began our campaign to more than double the amount by 2030. That means more than $50 billion of new climate investments in less than 7 years' time. Those investments will have real impact, cutting the carbon intensity of the CalPERS portfolio by half. Our effort is not only one of the most ambitious of any U.S. pension fund, we believe it is also highly achievable. And most importantly, this is an investment strategy that is strongly aligned with our fiduciary duty. So the $100 billion Climate Action Plan includes significant new investments across all 5 of CalPERS' asset classes by including both public equity and private equity, as well as real estate, infrastructure, and private debt. We are also assured that the plan is well diversified. Our Climate Action Plan will focus on opportunities in 3 specific types of climate investments. First, we will invest in climate change mitigation efforts, investments that reduce emissions, such as renewable energy, carbon capture and storage, and waste management. Next, we'll make investments in adaptation strategies. In this category, think of systems designed to manage floods and droughts, developing heat-resistant crops, or even new technology related to disaster preparedness and early warning systems. And then finally, CalPERS is seeking to support climate transition investments. These are investments that will help companies with high emissions to transition to become low emitters. This is probably one of the more controversial parts of the plan. One particularly important effort will be moving energy producers from so-called brown to green energy production. As an example, we want to support a forward-thinking utility to move from coal-fired power to renewable power generation. This results in direct benefits for the climate and for the company's bottom line, which is what we really care about as well. These types of companies need our investment dollars. Walking away from these opportunities could stall or even derail such critically important transitions. Our sustainable investing plan is balanced. It's aligned with the best practices of climate science and climate finance, and it's at a scale that will have impact now and well into the future. And as I said, we're already well underway. In just a few months, we're already evaluating more than $3 billion in new climate-related investments. Some of these we will be able to announce in the next few months, which I know the board is really excited about being able to make that public announcement. And then I think the pace will only pick up from there. So I know the magnitude of this can be a little hard to follow, so let me pause for a moment just to give some historical context. And again, we're planning on talking about going back to 1992 and the tech revolution. And if we would have known then what we know today, we would have doubled down on some of the tech companies like a Microsoft. And so we're in the beginning stages of this, but we are seeing really interesting opportunities for us to be a real leader in the space, not only leading on the voice and engagement, but also really, most importantly, actions and investments that we believe will give us those excess returns. So I'll pause there, and then I'm going to also talk a little bit about women's history. I just wanted to announce that our Pathways for Women event is coming back this year. We initially launched that back in 2021. You may remember we had to do that virtually. Everyone, the world was sitting at home and everyone was doing remote work, and Zoom bloomed during that time frame. So we took full advantage of that and were able to put on, I think, just a really interesting program with speakers who, I still have that network today. So please save the date for August 26th and 27th. That will be in Anaheim, California. Christina will get out a save the date calendar notice to all of you. But remember, this event is open to everyone. As we know, most women's pathways have included strong relationships with their entire network and not just women. Allies and sponsors, we've heard that throughout every one of the Pathways events that we've hosted, remain a critical part of the path, as we've also heard through our women on this board. These are people who will endorse and use their own professional networks to open doors, to clear challenges, have those crucial conversations with you about where you might need some skill set development. Those are not always easy, as we know, if you've been on the other side of that, but critically important for that next step in your career, if that is your interest. We do host this event in August of each year to celebrate women's right to vote, which was ratified on August 18, 1920. So that does complete my report, President Taylor, but I'm happy to take questions on the Sustainable Investment Plan or any other questions the board may have.
Thank you, Ms. Frost. We appreciate your comments. We should figure out a way to put that on our website.
Got it.
So we are moving on with regular business now, and that means we're moving on to agenda item 5, action consent items.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Mr. Pacheco. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any objections? Motion passes. Information consent items. I have not received anything on this to pull. So then we will move on to committee reports. And first on committee reports is, hold on, you got to put your thing. Mr. Miller for investments. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. The Investment Committee met on March 18th, 2024. The committee approved the following. Agenda item 6A, Mid-Cycle Public Employees Retirement Fund Asset Liability Management Review. The committee received reports on the following topics. CalPERS Trust Level Review Consultants Report, CalPERS Trust Level Review, Proxy Voting and Corporate Engagement Update, Total Fund Policy Review First Reading, and Policy Changes for Responsible Contractor Policy First Reading. The chair directed staff to provide an in-depth review of the proxy voting policy, including a board education session with a discussion of key principles and themes. The committee heard public comment on the following topics: management of the total portfolio, labor issues, and climate change. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the June Investment Committee meeting. Quarterly Chief Investment Officer Report, private equity, private debt, and real assets annual program reviews, implementation of labor principles, mid-cycle affiliate investment program asset liability management review, and second readings for the total fund policy review and responsible contractor policy. The next meeting of the Investment Committee is scheduled for June 10th, 2024 in Sacramento, California. Thank you, President Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Next on the agenda is Pension and Health Benefits Committee, Mr. Rubalcaba.
Thank you, Madam President. The Pension and Health Benefits Committee met on March 19, 2024. The committee recommends, and I move, the board adopt the following. Agenda item 5A. Approve staff's recommendation to amend section 574 of chapter 2 of division 1 of title 2 of the California Code of Regulations to describe how a classified school member's full-time pay rate shall be reported to the California Public Employees Retirement System, followed by submission of the final rulemaking package to the Office of Administrative Law upon conclusion of the 45-day public comment period, if no public comments are received.
All right. Okay. Motion has been approved. Is there any discussion on the motion? He actually already moved that, so you don't need to do that. All right. And no discussion on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? Okay. Moving on. Go ahead.
Thank you. The committee received reports on the following topics. The committee received the health open enrollment results, 2024 retiree cost of living adjustment, the COLA, and a health spotlight representation from Western Health Advantage and Sharp Health Plans. The committee received public comment regarding 90-day prescriptions, that's Optum RX, and long-term care. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the next Pension and Health Benefits Committee. The committee will meet in closed session in May to discuss an update on health plan rate renewal negotiation strategy, and on the BPO, the Preferred Provider Organization, third-party administrator solicitation. The next meeting of the Pension and Health Benefits Committee is scheduled for May 2024 in Sacramento, California. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rubalcaba. We had no meeting of the Finance Administration Committee, Performance Compensation, or Risk and Audit. Therefore, we're moving on to Board Governance Committee. With that, Mr. Miller.
The Board Governance Committee met on March 19th, 2024. The committee held an election for the Board Governance Committee Chair and Vice Chair. Teresa Taylor was elected Chair and David Miller was elected Vice Chair. The next meeting of the Board Governance Committee is tentatively scheduled for June 12th, 2024 in Sacramento, California. And that's all I have, President Taylor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Don't turn off your microphone because we are now moving into action agenda items A, proposed decisions of administrative law judges.
Okay. Everybody has their materials on this subject. And so at this point, I'll move to adopt the proposed decisions at agenda items 8A1 through 4, all those together, as the board's own decisions with minor modifications argued by staff to agenda items 8A2 and 8A4, and remand the proposed decision at agenda item 8A5 for the taking of additional evidence as argued by staff.
All those in favor?
Oh, do we need a second?
I'm sorry. I need a second. So he moved. Second by Mr. Pacheco. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposition or abstentions? All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. We have two petitions at agenda items 8B1 and 2. I will move them separately. So I move to deny the petition at agenda item 8B1.
All right, I need a second on that motion. Mr. Pacheco seconds the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposition? Any abstention? All right, motion carries.
Okay. Now I move to deny the petition at agenda item 8B2.
All right, on motion, I need a second. Seconded by Mr. Pacheco. All those in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. The record note that CalHR abstains.
Okay, and that's it for this item. Back to you, President Taylor.
We don't have anything on petitions for reconsider, right? Is it on your thing? Oh, petitions. Okay, sorry. All right, now we're moving on to agenda item 9A, state and federal legislative update.
8.
Oh. I'm sorry, that is still Danny. Go ahead, Danny. 8C.
Sure. Good morning, Madam President, board members, Danny Brown, CalPERS, team members. And yes, this item is 8C, an action item on a ballot initiative called the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act. This initiative would amend the California State Constitution to change the definitions and processes state and local governments use to impose new or higher taxes or other charges. This initiative is eligible for the November ballot. However, it does not officially qualify for the ballot until the end of June. Today, in order to increase statewide taxes, the state constitution requires both the Senate and the Assembly to approve the increase with a 2/3 vote in each house or approval through a statewide ballot initiative with a majority vote. To increase local taxes, existing law requires the approval of the local governing body and the approval of the local jurisdiction of voters. Tax increases for a specific purpose require a 2/3 vote from local voters, while tax increases for any purpose require a majority vote from local voters. Additional local governing bodies may increase or change fees and other charges within certain limits. This initiative, among other things, would require that new or higher state taxes passed by the legislature also be approved by a statewide ballot initiative with a majority vote. For local governments, the initiative specifies that no local law may impose, extend, or increase a general tax or impose a special tax unless it has been approved by the local jurisdiction of voters by a majority vote. A lawsuit has been filed by the governor and the legislature that argues that this initiative is invalid because it would not amend the state constitution but revise it, and that it impairs general government functions. The California Supreme Court is expected to hear arguments soon, with the hope it renders a decision in late June. Generally, the initiative is supported by business and tax groups and opposed by the governor, local governments, and labor groups. And I believe you received many letters from local governments and labor groups requesting the board oppose this initiative. And with that, I'll end my remarks and answer any questions.
Okay, I do have comments by Ms. Middleton.
Danny, I'm afraid I don't have any questions, but I do want to make some comments. It's my hope that this board will unanimously stand in opposition to this initiative. This initiative, if passed by the voters, would significantly weaken the financial stability of every city and every county in the state of California. It would impair the ability of local government to carry out essential services, including police, fire, all public safety, and the ability of local government to be able to fund the retirement programs that we have committed to for all of our employees. beyond just simply trying to limit the ability of major tax increases, this initiative goes so far as to define simple, normal fees that individuals pay, such as a permit fee as a tax that would require approval of the voters before we could change fees on planning department fees and any other fee that is passed by a city council, throwing into complete disarray the ability of municipalities to charge for the services that they render to individuals. Lastly, and very importantly, this initiative seeks, with the ability of no more than 50% plus one voter, the ability of that very small majority to require a supermajority of 2/3 voters going forward on any initiative. So again, it is my hope that we unanimously stand with cities and counties and local government across the state in opposing this very radical new interpretation of our tax structure.
Thank you, Ms. Middleton. I'm going to take a personal privilege myself and say that I also hope the board opposes this as well. I see this as another way for our governments not to be able to fund themselves. I was at 16 when Prop 13 passed and watched everything go away in our schools. So this will hit every level of government and touch everyone's lives. And to think that the Business Roundtable, multi-billion-dollar companies, are trying to take our ability to have ballot initiatives and use it against the people of California should make people very angry, because that's what they're doing. And finally, I just want to make sure that everybody knows, remember, it hasn't been that long. I think Governor Brown was the one that finally got that passed, that we had to have a 2/3 majority to pass the budget. So how long it took for us to get budgets passed in the state of California, not only that, but it will absolutely impact the ability for CalPERS to have its employers funding the system. And that's unacceptable. And a lot of these companies we invest in. So we need to take a look at that. And with that, I'm going to call on Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I think, there's really no point for me to ramble on adding more. This is not surprising because we've seen these kind of concerted attacks before. But so at this point, I will move that we take a position to strongly oppose this.
I'll second it. Well, we're not there yet. Hold on. I have more of us and public comment.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Willett.
Thank you. I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, and I say that this act is a serious threat to pension and retirement funds at the state level, the local levels, and as written, it's a careless initiative that I think jeopardizes our ability to meet our pension obligations. As stated, it would break the promise of a dignified retirement and badly needed health care for millions of current and future retirees. I do want to also just appreciate the public comment written in support of the board for this act to take a position. Sorry, thank you.
We will vote on moving this in a moment. I have no. Oh, I do. I'm sorry, Mr. Pacheco.
Thank you. I would just like to concur as well with my colleagues taking an opposition position on this, because I feel that it is the opposition position is in line with our CalPERS fiduciary duty to ensure the stability of our fund, because this ballot would basically restrict local and state government ability to raise revenue to pay for their pension obligations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'm sorry, Mr. Pacheco. So now I'm going to call on public commenters for 8C. And first I'm going to bring up Carolyn Coleman and Mitch Steger. Over to my left here, and the microphones will go on. Ms. Coleman, you start. And you can.
Thank you, Madam President, and my condolences on the loss of your friend. Good morning, President Taylor and members of the board. My name is Carolyn Coleman. I'm Executive Director and CEO of the League of California Cities. And I want to thank this board, and I want to thank your CEO, Marcy Frost, for the continued focus and attention on employer affordability. We all know that local government's ability to pay their CalPERS obligations is critical to a healthy pension fund. Today, I want to talk about the Taxpayer Protection Act, or what we refer to as the Taxpayer Deception Act. This measure, which is scheduled to be on the November 2024 ballot, is an existential threat to our local governments, our state, and the pension fund itself. It should also be noted that the provisions of this measure are retroactive to January 2022, which would and could possibly invalidate over 100 local measures that have already been passed and their residents are already relying upon. To put it simply, this act, sponsored by the California Business Roundtable, is a wolf in sheep's clothing. While it claims to protect taxpayers, it will endanger public services and put the public employee pension system at risk. If passed, it would upend local government finances overnight, attacking local government's ability to provide the services that our residents depend upon and to meet their pension obligations to the fund and really to its beneficiaries. Now, you may ask, what are these services we're talking about? They're the public services that we all know and love in our communities. It's preventing and reducing homelessness. It's planning for more housing. It's picking up the trash. It's putting out fires. It's paving streets and roads. And it's guaranteeing that when any one of us calls 911, that someone will be there to pick up the phone. We all know here that employer contributions are vital to the long-term fiscal viability of the fund. And if local governments cannot predictably meet their obligations to the fund, then the very health of the system is at risk. Over 200 cities throughout California have specifically opposed this dangerous measure, and this number is growing daily. As you have already heard from some of the folks who have written letters to you, this measure is opposed by a broad coalition of labor, of local governments, of firefighters, teachers, the working class, and so many more. This measure will simply not protect taxpayers. It will jeopardize our communities, their local services, and the pension benefits of those who have earned them and deserve them. Thank you so much for your time today, and I urge your opposition to this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, thank you, Ms. Coleman. Mitch Steiger. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
Yes, you did. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, President Taylor, members and staff. Mitch Steiger with CFT, a union of educators and classified professionals. Also here to echo the comments of the previous speaker and those on the board urging opposition to this measure. For a few reasons. First, we think it's important to kind of pause and think about where we are in terms of the current budget situation. We're looking at the worst budget deficit in recent memory. We've been told everything is on the table. Our members are going to be fighting for their jobs, fighting to protect what we've got. And into this situation comes the Taxpayer Deception Act to really add fuel to the fire and really put us in a very scary place in terms of what the long-term impact of this could be, both to our members' jobs, but also everything else that all these investments go toward in terms of a functioning education system, a functioning transportation infrastructure, all of these systems that connect, that make California great. They are all facing grave risk as a result, excuse me, of this measure. We also think it's important to think about really just the mission of CalPERS and what's happening here, where we have members, many of whom don't make much money, setting aside a pretty large percentage of that money to take care of them in their own retirement. This is money that they need right now to deal with a lot of the inflation that ironically is being forced on them by some of the funders of this measure. And they're saying we need this for later on in our lives when we can no longer work or when we don't want to work, where we've put in our decades of service and we now deserve a dignified retirement. This measure will very much make it less likely that CalPERS is able to hold up their end of the bargain as all of these different systems struggle, as our investments struggle, and potentially even the entire economy of our state struggles. We have a lot of money tied up in private businesses that need a functioning infrastructure. And as the negative effects of this measure ripple throughout the economy, it is going to make it so that our members are not only struggling now because of the money that they're setting aside, but struggling in the future as their retirement benefits, as their retirement health care is not funded as well, is less reliable, is in a much more difficult place than it should be. So for a variety of reasons, we very much urge the board to take the position that it sounds like you're strongly considering today. We think it's a really important message to send statewide and to our members who are relying on these systems to give them the dignified lives in retirement that they deserve, and we urge you to oppose the measure today. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Molina and Megan Subers, if you would come up. And you can both sit down. You don't have to stand and wait. There's 2 chairs there. And Brian, you go first.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for being here. My name is Brian Molina, and I'm the Legislative Campaign Manager with California Calls. Our alliance is made up of 31 grassroots community-based organizations spanning 16 rural, suburban, urban counties across the state. We educate, engage, and motivate new and infrequent voters from communities of color and from poor and working class neighborhoods to make California's electorate more reflective of our state's diverse population. I'm here today to say that we stand in strong opposition to the Taxpayer Deception Act, along with the growing and diverse coalition of over 200 community-based organizations, labor unions, faith-based organizations, California teachers, California firefighters, and over 200 California cities. We stand in opposition to this dangerous measure for 3 reasons. Number 1, this measure would systemically defund state and local governments. It would make it nearly impossible to generate revenue at the local level and end critical safety net programs our people need and depend on. Number 2, this measure allows for a super minority of just 33% to block every funding measure every time. And number 3, the retroactivity clause in this measure could nullify up to 140 state and local measures spanning the last 2 years. This overturns billions of dollars in revenue and has the biggest impact on working class Californians across the state who are already struggling to make ends meet. I have to say this. California is home to some of the richest and wealthiest communities in the world. It's also home to some of the poorest and most dangerous in the world. California Calls and the organizations and cities who oppose this measure represent working folks from communities that have so little that they have almost nothing left to take from them. Standing on the other side of this, the folks who support and fund this measure come from communities so rich and so in excess that there's almost literally nothing more that can be given to them. What this measure does is take that little bit from the working class the working class communities have left and transfer it to the absolute richest among us. Our communities deserve investment, dignity, and funding. We strongly urge CalPERS to oppose this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Megan?
Thank you.
Hold on. There you go.
Thank you very much, members of the board. Megan Subers here on behalf of the California Professional Firefighters. We represent about 35,000 career firefighters and emergency medical service personnel across the state, many of which are employed by CalPERS contracted agencies and hope to one day earn their retirement from CalPERS. I think you've heard a lot about the very dramatic negative impacts this ballot measure will have on the state and locals' ability to just make sure they have the revenue needed to support everything, every service they provide, including fire and emergency response. So maybe I'll just hit on a couple quick points. This measure threatens that ability for a local government to decide what is needed in their community when it comes to who responds to that 911 call. when people have to make that call on sometimes the worst day of their lives. So we feel like this is an important action for CalPERS to take to send a strong message that we support local governments, we support the state's ability to decide what's best for emergency response for the state of California. And as you heard, the retroactivity provision will have severe consequences on a government's ability to manage and plan its fiscal affairs. We have locals up and down this state that have worked hard with their Board of Supervisors, City Council to pass local measures to fund emergency response and fire services locally. And as you heard, there are over 100 that we know of that could be nullified and pulled back. The financial health of public agencies is crucial for bargaining wages and benefits, but also ensuring that local governments have the ability to stay true to their commitment to provide a secure retirement to their members. So that's also obviously a very important point that we think is important for CalPERS to maintain their fiduciary responsibility to their members of the system. And for those reasons, hope that you will stand with us to oppose this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Subers. Aaron Avery and Bryant Miramontes. These two seats on my left, on your right. Brian, you are up first.
Good morning, President Taylor, members of the board. My name is Bryant Miramontes, and I am with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. We represent approximately 200,000 workers in the state, including over 130 municipalities who are a part of the CalPERS system. As was shared by the board members and the speakers before me, the forthcoming ballot measure, deceptively coined the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act, is an attack on state and local governments' ability to meet the needs of their communities, essentially tying their hands and preventing them from providing critical services that the public relies on. This would create chaos, exacerbate the deficit, and create unbalanced budgets, all of which would have significant repercussions on the pension fund. We urge the board's position on the measure as it is critical and in line with CalPERS' fiduciary responsibility to protect the fund's solvency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, President Taylor and members of the board. My name is Aaron Avery, Director of State Legislative Affairs for the California Special Districts Association. I've also been asked to make comments today on behalf of the California State Association of Counties. CSDA represents more than 1,000 special district local governments, employing tens of thousands of frontline public employees, providing essential services in the state, including water, fire protection, healthcare, recreation and parks, and more. We join our partners in labor and local government partners as well, and respectfully urging the board to adopt an opposed position today on the initiative known as the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act, but more aptly called the Taxpayer Deception Act. Opposing this initiative is consistent with the board's fiduciary responsibilities to CalPERS members for two primary reasons I will touch on today. First, the initiative would limit the ability of voters to express their will through local initiatives and vastly complicate how state and local governments fund core services. This initiative would undermine local government's ability to fund our operations and meet financial and contractual obligations, including to CalPERS. Keeping faith with the commitments our voters and their elected representatives have made to our workforce and the communities they serve is important to all of us. Second, this initiative would upend the economy and potentially undermine the businesses and other assets that CalPERS invests in. This state's economic success depends on a robust public infrastructure, including adequate water supply, safe roads and bridges, and reliable public safety. This initiative would undermine these key pillars of economic vitality through defunding public safety efforts that protect our communities and their local businesses, through thwarting economic development investments, including convention centers, meeting places, sports complexes, entertainment venues, and other amenities that help businesses grow and that stimulate our economy. The initiative would cut off federal infrastructure dollars by severely limiting and restricting matching funds and the ultimate purpose of grant funds from the federal government. And finally, the initiative would destabilize the municipal financing market by pulling the rug out from under already obligated capital improvement financings. And perhaps most notably, and as noted by several commenters already this morning, this initiative would apply retroactively for 3 years. For these reasons, we respectfully urge the board to adopt an opposed position on the initiative, and we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Avery. And lastly, oh no, never mind. Terry's on something else. So we are now the board. Yeah, we need a motion. I have you on 9A. You okay? Come on up, Mr. Brennan. That's why I was gonna call you, and then I saw it said 9A.
My apologies for not knowing the difference between 9A and 8C, but good morning. And one of the privileges going last is everybody's virtually said everything that needs to be said. You wish. I'm going to try and use my 3 minutes wisely. A couple things. We need to focus on your fiduciary duty here. It's to the members of the agencies, the member agencies, the members, and the system as a whole. Nothing interferes with your ability to interact and fulfill that obligation than this initiative. It makes it virtually impossible for local governments to manage their budgets and therefore make the necessary contributions. The only other thing I think that was referenced was many of the people funding this initiative are your partners. To the tune of about $12 billion, and I just want to recognize a few of them: Blackstone, Kilroy, Hudson, Pepsi, Chevron, Wells Fargo, just to name a few. The level of greed that says it's okay for them to evade taxation and restriction and then impinge upon your ability to invest in real estate, to invest in infrastructure and all the other things you want to do. It's obscene, it's unconscionable, it's irresponsible, and we urge you not only to vote against this, but to engage those partners and talk to them about that's not going to stand in the CalPERS portfolio. You can't use my members' money, my agency money, to devastate our own system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. And at this point, with no further public comment, I will entertain a motion. I need a motion for what it is.
Okay. I move that that the board take a position, strong opposition to the Taxpayer Deception
Act. I'll second it. I've got so many seconds. So I'm going to just pick Kevin Palke because I think Mr. Pacheco has a whole bunch of seconds. So with that, this is a voice vote, is that correct? Or is this a electronic vote? I'm going to put us on the record. It's an electronic vote. All those in favor or opposed, go ahead. Correct, we're opposing it by a yes vote. One abstention. Is that all of us? I guess so. Okay. All right, thank you very much. The motion to oppose the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act has passed. The Board of Administration does oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Unanimous.
No. I have an abstention.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. We will move on at this point now to 9A.
Thank you, Madam President, and I will be quick because I know you have you said at 10 o'clock certain, and I have a very short state update, but I do have Dan Crowley on the line for the federal update. So for the state update, I'll just say that the bill introduction deadline is passed. You have a updated bill list in your material packet. We've added a handful of retirement bills. We're still going through about 3 dozen healthcare related bills, and so we will add those next month as necessary. And then, as was mentioned earlier by Ms. Frost at the joint informational hearing was canceled last week, but I did want to point out that Ms. Frost and I have had the opportunity, though, to meet with a number of members individually and discuss the plan and covering many of the points that she shared with you today. And so we will continue to do that as we meet with legislatures and any future meetings. So moving to the federal update, before I turn it over to Dan, I did just want to mention that on Friday we submitted a response to a request for information put out by the House Education and the Workforce Committee. In our response, we provided valuable insight into proven strategies that reduce healthcare costs and improve quality of care. With our specific comments, we focused on specialty drug coverage, prohibited transactions as it relates to vertical integration and consolidation in the healthcare sector, and data sharing. And that letter should be on our website soon. And with that, I will turn it over to Dan Crowley. Hopefully he is on the line.
Is off, so he can't hear me either. Dan, are you here?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's great. Give me 1 second here to reconfigure my speaker so I can hear you. Okay, we still online?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So I know you're pressed for time. I will just give a very quick update. I'm Dan Crowley with the law firm of K&L Gates. I lead the bipartisan team that represents your interests on federal policy issues in Washington, D.C. We've been very carefully tracking the state of play on federal funding. Congress has passed the first 6 appropriations bills for FY 2024, and they have until this Friday, March 22nd, to pass the remaining 6. If they are unable to do that, there will be at least a short-term government shutdown. I had breakfast this morning with Senator Mike Rounds from South Dakota, who tells me that while the intent is there, the logistics make it quite possible that they will exceed that deadline, and we will in fact have a short government shutdown, but it's not expected to go beyond that. On China investments, there's a stalemate in the House while they await passage of the appropriations bills, but there does continue to be bipartisan interest in restricting outbound investments to China. There's a working group in the House that's working through those issues, as well as a competing group that is supporting the Countering Communist China Act, which would basically prohibit all outbound investments into Chinese technology companies. House Financial Services Committee Chairman Patrick McHenry, working with the ranking member Maxine Waters, are focused on the current system for vetting foreign investment through OFAC and established procedures. And since they are the bipartisan leaders on the Committee of Jurisdiction, I expect that approach ultimately will prevail. And it's worth noting that there continues to be an incredible amount of bipartisan cooperation on the House Financial Services Committee. It's not all bipartisan, and we'll get into the hearing that's ongoing as we speak in a moment. But it is notable that Congresswoman Waters has issued a number of press releases this year praising the bipartisanship on dozens of bills that have cleared the House. Most of them won't pass the Senate, but I think that bipartisanship is notable, particularly because it conflicts with press reports about how dysfunctional Washington is these days. Very quickly on the SEC climate rule, this is something that CalPERS has advocated for the past 2 years since the proposal was initially introduced. The SEC finally approved the rule on March 6th. There is pushback, mostly from Republicans. It is expected that Senate Banking Ranking Member and House Financial Services Committee Subcommittee on Oversight Chair Bill Huizenga will introduce a Congressional Resolution Act resolution to disapprove the SEC rule. If that passes somehow, it is certain that President Biden would veto it. So it's purely a political gesture. I mentioned the House Financial Services Committee hearing that is occurring as we speak. That is a hearing on SEC overreach and it covers a number of proposed rules, including the climate risk disclosure rule. More importantly, lawsuits have been filed now in 6 separate federal circuit courts in different jurisdictions by different actors. Most of the suits have been filed in Republican-dominated courts like the Fifth Circuit, but the Sierra Club has sued in the Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, and the Natural Resources Defense Council has sued in the Second Circuit. And the reason that's important is that on Friday, yesterday, the SEC has petitioned the Judicial Panel on Multi-District Litigation for a lottery to determine which of those appellate courts will hear the case. Natural Resources Defense Council and Sierra Club have both filed in jurisdictions where Democrats dominate the court. And I think the plan is to increase the chances that the lottery goes to one of those jurisdictions. My objective assessment is that the SEC narrowed the proposal sufficient to withstand judicial scrutiny. And the question is whether a federal judge agrees with that analysis. My sense of it is that a federal judge will be reluctant to undermine the disclosure framework for investors that has served the country well for nearly 90 years. And no federal judge is going to want to be responsible for calling into question the efficacy of that disclosure regime, but that remains to be determined. So, Madam President, with that, I'd be happy to pause and take any questions.
Thank you. I do have. Can we turn that off? Sorry about that. I do have Mr. Rufino for Fiona Ma. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Real quick, 2 quick questions. The first one for Mr. Brown, with respect to the canceled joint hearing, legislative hearing, if they announce, is it going to be rescheduled, or we don't know at this time?
There's been no indication at this time as to that they have a plan to reschedule it. I say it's likely not going to happen, not going to be rescheduled.
Okay. And then, sir, on the federal side, may I ask if you have a sense of any progress on H.R. 82? I know that the Senate is very close to get to the 60. I believe Senator Schumer.
You want to give us what an H.R. 82 is, Frank?
So that's the government pension offset and windfall elimination provision, which we've been talking about for many, many years, and a very difficult and complex subject. But I'm just curious if we made any progress. I know that we have more co-sponsors that we ever had in the history of this legislation, and we were waiting for the Senate to reach that magic number, and I think Senator Schumer just sign on this legislation. So, from your perspective, do you have any news, good, bad, indifferent, to share?
And I would be happy to look into that and revert as soon as I can get you better information.
And
well, I was just going to add, and I think this is, I may have said this before, but I think one of the reasons why the bill was referred to the Ways and Means Committee is to prevent it from moving, because it does have enough authors where it could just move through the floor through suspension of the rules. But by sending it to the committee, it's kind of being held hostage by the committee chairs and leadership, and probably around the funding of it.
Okay.
And one last, Secure 2, there's rumors that we may see a Secure 3. What you hear at the federal level, is there any initiative to that effect, that we may get a Secure 3 this year, or is that too premature?
I don't think we'll see a Secure 3 this year. We may see some movement in that direction. It is notable that there are bipartisan discussions going on with respect to taxes generally. That is sort of counterintuitive given the composition of Congress and the very close divide. But House Ways and Means Chairman Jason Smith has been reaching across the aisle to find areas of agreement, and they have a package of proposals that enjoys bipartisan support. The biggest problem we have is the dysfunction in Congress and the inability to agree on basic fundamentals like funding the government. So I think progress on Secure Act 3.0 is likely to be deferred into the next Congress, but there is bipartisan agreement on the need to move forward on a number of issues related to pensions and retirement security.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
Yes, Madam President, if I may add to the question about the joint informational hearing, we have been told that Assemblymember McKenna is going to hear SB 252 this year. So as you recall, last year she did not hear it. She is hearing it this year, and so that might have played into, that's probably going to play into the fact of whether or not there is a rescheduling of a joint informational hearing, since there's going to be a hearing on 252, likely in June.
All right, thank you. I think that's all the questions we have from the board. With that, thank you, Danny. We will move on to the board self-assessment. And with that, I'm calling up, looks like Travis and Carrie.
All right, great to be here this morning. Good to see everyone again. Travis Antoniano, Investment Director with Sustainable Investments. I'm here today to be able to provide a little bit of an introduction on the board self-assessment item. As mentioned earlier this morning, this is an item that is revisited on a every 2-year basis as required by the CalPERS Board Governance Policy. Back in July, I presented to the board at the board offsite a bit of an overview of the comprehensive board self-assessment process, the governance model, as well as the requirements from different board members as well, and some historical aspects of what was taking place in previous board self-assessments. After July, I worked with Christina Ortega and the board services group to be able to identify a vendor, ultimately, which led to NACD. That process was carried out during the fall, and then that takes us to today, where the Honorable Carrie Dominguez will be able to actually provide all the findings and some insights into perhaps what's next. So with that said, I'll pass it off to Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you very much.
The mic's not on. There we go.
Good, good. Well, thank you very much, Travis, for setting the stage so nicely. And good morning, President Taylor, Vice President Miller, members of the board. It's a privilege for me. First of all, it's great to see you in person. We have Zoomed, and it's nice to be together in person. And it's a privilege for me to meet with you today to discuss the findings of the 2023 CalPERS board self-evaluation. A colleague of mine, we serve on a board together, and he recently quipped that serving on a board is a part-time job with full-time responsibilities. And I think that's a very accurate statement, given the volatility, the uncertainty, the types of issues that board members are dealing with. It's a full-time job, and being prepared, trying to address all the challenges, the complexity, it really requires more of your time, of your expertise than ever before. So identifying ways to enhance your board effectiveness while operating as efficiently as possible is really pivotal to a successful outcome. And that's what we hope to accomplish today, to really further your mission and to further your commitment to organizational excellence. And we hope that in a small way, this effort will allow you to move forward in your commitment to continuous improvement. Again, I want to thank the full board for the insights, for the candor, and for the commitment in terms of time and effort that you gave to this effort. And I'd like to thank management, CEO Marcy Frost, a member of her staff, for all the cooperation and assistance that was rendered to NACD during this time. Let's see if I can talk and click at the same time. There we go. Okay, so for our agenda today, we're going to begin with a brief refreshment of the self-assessment process. President Taylor, you mentioned that it was done in the fall. So this is a bit of a refresher just to keep everyone using the same baseline. We're then going to get into the qualitative and the quantitative analysis of the findings. I'm going to highlight some of the prevalent themes that came up, and then we're going to conclude with some next steps that we believe you may want to consider, and I believe you're already considering in your journey towards continuous enhancement. Just a few things to set the stage. First of all, this is entirely the board's feedback. These are your views and your comments. NACD simply served as a facilitator, as the analyst trying to interpret the scores and the comments. And essentially what we're doing is we're a mirror reflecting back to you what your views, your areas of interest, what you believe your strengths are. By the way, looking at the ratings compared to many other board self-assessments that I have conducted, you are all pretty hard raters, which tells me that you have set very high standards of performance excellence for yourselves. The second point is that the findings reflect the dynamics of a newly blended board, coming together with different views, expectations, and experiences. Almost half the board is relatively new. And so you're serving your first term. This is your first formal evaluation process. So one can expect differences in terms of interest, in terms of points of emphasis. We have taken all of that into account and believe that the findings represent a fair and balanced view of the important issues that were collectively expressed. And finally, keep in mind that this self-assessment captures a particular point in time, again, back in the fall. And so it represents a baseline from which you may have already done some work. You've been building on it. So in terms of the process, back in 2023, we circulated the questionnaire with the questions were specifically tailored to the CalPERS Board of Administration. We got 100% participation, full participation, and again, I want to thank everyone for the time and effort that was devoted to this work. After we received the completed questionnaires, I conducted one-on-one interviews with each one of you as follow-up, just to get a better understanding of the comments, of the rankings, and give you an opportunity to further elaborate. Again, we interpreted the comments, analyzed the data, the whole focus being the opportunity to identify your strengths, as well as opportunities for enhancing board effectiveness. As President Taylor mentioned, you'll recall that the survey consisted of 28 general statements that center around these 5 core areas of governance competencies. And for each area, you ranked both on a dual scale, both effectiveness and importance. The effectiveness scale allowed each board member to assess the degree to which they see an activity producing the results intended, being successful in producing results intended, while the importance scale assessed the degree to which an area of responsibility is likely to generate significant time and attention on the part of the board. We then took all the rankings and we averaged them to come up with an overall rating. In addition to the full board, we self-assessed 3 committees: performance, compensation, and talent management. Pension and Health Benefit, Finance and Administration Committees. Again, all the statements were ranked on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being poor, 5 being excellent, 3 being good, 4 being great. We try to aim at the 4 rating. It's hard to do when you're hard raters, but we think that that's an area of opportunity and focus for boards. Any questions about the process? Okay, hearing none. In terms of leading strengths, complete commitment to CalPERS' mission and its vital role on the marketplace and in the well-being of its beneficiaries. Particularly noteworthy was the number of references made to the collegiality and the spirit of partnership that prevails during the board's proceedings and interactions. Great desire expressed for continuous improvement, whether through professional board development, executive education, outreach to subject matter experts, both within or outside the organization, or mentorship. Another noteworthy I like to emphasize is the resiliency that, given some of the issues that CalPERS faced last year, how resilient and how quickly CalPERS was able to respond to those issues. And again, as it has been in previous years, stakeholder engagement is considered a very, very strong organizational strength, and also one that board members would like to continue to find opportunities to further those engagements and those relationships. Okay, drilling down to each specific well, let me go back. This is the overall board assessment. This looks at all the 5 governance competencies across the board. As you can see, there's very little alignment, and it's typical of boards. Little alignment between importance, which is the dark blue, and effectiveness, which is the light blue. But again, as I said earlier, we do try to aim for a rating of 4. And so anything under a 4 rating provides an opportunity for the board to focus on it. And in this particular set of competencies, we see that talent oversight and CEO succession planning is the key category where the board would like to expand its focus this year, followed by strategy and risk. And again, those 3 components go together. You can't have a good strategy without the right talent to execute it. And if we drill down, board structure, again, the questions that this particular category aims to address include things like, are we organized in a manner that is responsive to our roles and responsibilities? Do we understand our roles vis-a-vis management's roles? Are we developing board leadership by the manner we rotate committee chairships, we delegate responsibilities? Are we developing future skills that will be needed for our board members? This is a very full slide, but given the time that, since the time that you completed, we thought it might be helpful to refresh your memory and to add the specific statements that you responded to. As you can see, the top 3 areas to the left are the key areas of focus where you have the greatest variance between importance and effectiveness. Specifically, even though this board is quite diverse, and in fact is one of the most diverse boards that I have worked with, it is committed and sees a strategic asset in not just the board diversity, but ensuring organizational diversity. And so the board would like to see continued progress, particularly at the executive leadership levels, but throughout the organization, whether it's operationalizing, looking through your committees, looking at the specific objectives that might be able to ensure a strong bench strength that includes diverse talent. The second one is board evaluation. Interesting in looking at not just every other year of a board self-assessment, but looking at what are the opportunities that you have every time there's a key point or an issue. What are the lessons learned? What can we learn from it? So we just want to make sure that the process is continuous and that you complement that with the formal process, which is a leading practice for boards. And then there is a strong desire to, with respect to investment strategy development, there's a strong desire for more discussion around roles and responsibilities, recognizing that half the board, close to half the board, is relatively new. This could be an area of further discussion and a clear understanding of roles. Moving to operational oversight, this component is designed to address questions such as, do we have all the right tools to help us plan and invest our time and expertise on issues that advance CalPERS' mission and strategic objectives, whether it's the board calendar, whether it's agenda setting, whether it's looking at the CalPERS governance principles. I want to make sure that the board keeps up with the changing business environment. And so if you look here, we see that it's decision-making, board member onboarding, and meeting preparation where we see the three largest variants that you've identified. Interestingly, the continuing education has perfect alignment, which reflects the importance and the access that you have to greater development and more learning. There were some comments around the desire for more clarity around placing items on the agenda that require follow-up and follow-through. Also, members, and this is not unusual, some members reflected on the importance of reviewing and updating follow-ups. If your decision is made, let's make sure we get on the agenda and to order to keep abreast of the latest trends and the things that we've agreed to do. Also staying abreast of policies and procedures with the changing trends that require updates. These are the salient points with respect to decision-making, ensuring that the CalPERS staff is able to comply with board requests. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have issues that have come up, are we making sure that the staff has the wherewithal to address those requests, whether a presentation or an action that requires follow-up. The second one is board member onboarding. A number of new members just went through that process. It was well received, but there is a preference for in-person onboarding. There's a lot of information to be absorbed, and the process requires a lot of time, and some board members suggested that a longer process, maybe some modules or to break up throughout a year, might be the way to better absorb the information that is necessary, and as well as keeping up with all the policies and procedures that a new board member has to learn. This board holds 9 to 10 meetings a year, so you have very, very full agenda, and making sure that you have input into the agenda setting process also provides an opportunity to engage in discussions of issues of interest beyond those that are required by operational standards. Talent oversight. Now, this category is designed for the board to assess the breadth and depth of the organizational talent that drives the execution of strategy. The board is acutely aware of its importance, and it generated most of the comments that we received. with significant agreement around the ways to enhance the oversight process for succession planning. By the way, you're not alone. The top 3 priorities that boards across the nation have identified as their top priorities include talent, capital allocation, and technology, whether it's cyber data, cybersecurity, privacy data, or artificial intelligence. So this board is very consistent with the trends that we've been seeing and hearing about throughout all boards. Again, eagerness to have a succession planning process in place, not because there's urgency, but because it is a top fiduciary responsibility. With the shortage of key talents and the challenges of attracting and retaining talent, there is a great desire to continue discussions around talent acquisition, development, retention, succession, and again, diversity as a key strategic asset of CalPERS. We can have the best developed plan and products, but if you don't have the right talent to drive it, it's all for naught. So the board sees it that way. Next to talent, strategy oversight was a big area of focus for the board. Engaging in the development of strategy is one of the most important fiduciary responsibilities, as you know, whether it's gathering input early and often from the stakeholders or looking at alternatives, anticipating disruptions, particularly the technological disruptions, but also social and environmental. There are a host of considerations for the board to engage with management on. But the board continues its commitment to find more opportunities for stakeholder engagement, for reaching out, and these findings reflect a strong desire for more discussion and time around strategy development, and particularly around the importance of clarifying roles and responsibilities in the area of capital allocation, in the capital allocation strategy, investment strategy development process. Growing external factors affecting economic conditions, geopolitical issues, funding pressures, and other social and environmental issues. The board is very, very keen to work with management to look at alternatives to the strategy, to consider potentially disruptive risks and way to calibrate this strategy to ensure and preserve its soundness. The board clearly sees, given the times, the greater need for more frequent communications with executive leadership, not just with the CEO, but certainly with the executive leadership team during these very challenging times. Strategy and risk management go hand in hand, and these scores reflect the importance that the board continues to place on potential risks, whether cyber, economic conditions, capital allocation, or any other. A lot of discussion around artificial intelligence and the need for the board and the organization to stay abreast and ahead of it to better understand its implication was something that was often mentioned by board members. Also, a very strong desire to continue to be alerted to issues as they happen, so the board can be supportive, engaged, and more fully understanding of what are the issues facing the organization. The salient and most mentioned areas of interest expressed during the interviews were these three: express satisfaction with the prompt and effective handling of recent risk management issues, a desire to better understand the CalPERS Enterprise Risk Management Program, great comfort with the CEO's knowledge of ERM, but they would like to get more details, more fundamental understanding of the enterprise risk management, its infrastructure, and accountability procedures. Also, a lot of interest expressed in engaging in more discussions and guidance on cybersecurity, geopolitical, and population vulnerability risks. These were the board was quite unanimous that these were the three most often mentioned and the key accomplishments of the past 12 months. There were many that were mentioned, but these were the three that were most often mentioned: the labor principles, the commitment to green infrastructure investments, and the key hires and compensation adjustments that are able to facilitate attracting and having competitive compensation so that you can retain the right talent. There were other notable accomplishments included the importance of ongoing communications with stakeholders and the outreach to continue to find innovative ways to engage with stakeholders, look and successfully navigating through data security challenges, delivering on a healthcare program structure designed to promote equal access, the solicitation of PPO health care plans, all with the goal of making sure that health equity across all your members remains a priority. These were the top three priorities that were already mentioned by President Taylor earlier in terms of opportunities for enhancing effectiveness over the next 2 years. Leadership development and education. Again, this is a very uniquely constructed board, and so you have more turnover more frequently. So it's important that all the members stay abreast and engage in leadership development and education, make sure that you access that information and educational opportunities, which is always made available. Increase focus on strategy, short and long term, investment performance, risk volatility, uncertainty, monitoring all of the external and internal factors that could impact CalPERS funds. And of course, again, the top priority, executive management, executive leadership, CEO succession planning process with a focus on diversity, ensuring that an oversight process is in place to develop a bench strength in all the key executive roles. The CIO, Chief Investment Officer position, being top of mind. Other often mentioned priorities include again, ways to keep the stakeholders engaged and informed of CalPERS achievements, its impact not only in the marketplace, but in society in general. In terms of the attributes, these are just a trending compared to the 2021 board evaluation that you did. Is a way to measure how engaged and creative and insightful the different, depending on the issues that each board obviously is difficult to compare because issues change from one cycle to another. But you can see the trends seem much more improved. Everything that you've rated is pretty much on 4.4 and above. And the collegiality, a lot of reference about the importance of culture and how important building a foundation of trust, openness, transparency continues to be a key driver for this board. Attentiveness to issues that make for a high-performing board was another priority. As you can see, it's significantly higher than the 2021 cycle. Again, much higher ratings. A number of comments expressed about the continuing to foster appreciation and inclusion of diverse points of views. And so board culture came up quite a number of times, and particularly in the attributes component of this assessment. As I mentioned earlier, we also had the board self-assess 3 of its committees. The Performance Compensation and Talent Management Committee scored considerably higher compared to the 2021 cycle, particularly in its use of and quality of outside consultants. High marks on the external consultants. The performance monitoring, as you can see, had a bit of a dip compared to 2021. That's because a number of members have not gone through that process, so they weren't able to rate that particular piece of the statements. Again, lots of focus on CEO succession planning and the importance to have a very tight and focused agenda that allows for fuller discussions of the issues before the committee. The Finance and Audit Committee stayed on its steady course compared to the 2021 cycle. As you can see, it's very consistent. A lot of focus around asset liability management with a desire for more input to ensure that the assumptions underpinning the projections remain sound. The very high marks given to the CalPERS staff for their support. It's good comments, being a well-organized committee. We'd like to have more detailed information around some of the investment strategies, overall budget strategies and actions. But as you can see, fairly high marks. The Pension and Health Benefits Committee. This committee received high marks for its leadership and the high caliber of CalPERS staff support, highly focused on ways to keep down healthcare costs and in check. The committee would like to focus this year on the process, better understanding the process for retaining consultants, more clarity around how rates are compared and determined. Committee members fully recognize the challenge of controlling healthcare costs, but are fully committed to that effort. And then holding plans accountable for that focus is a key priority of many of the comments that were received. So in summary, the key themes that resonated across this assessment process, number one, above all, the CEO succession planning and talent oversight process. We've talked about that, along with investment strategy development and role clarification. What's the role of the board? What's the role of management? Are there any particular points that need to be clarified to make sure that both parties are fully engaged and carry out their fiduciary responsibilities? Board processes and participation, particularly with the newer board members, process, communications, access is key. And so making sure that find ways, efficiencies in reporting, more effective use of the agenda setting process to follow through on issues, all part of number 3. Onboarding and leadership development. How do we find opportunities to delegate, to rotate, and then onboarding, allowing for more time to absorb all the information that you are responsible for. And again, as I mentioned earlier, continuous improvement, looking at informal, personal, lessons learned. What can we do better? Those types of opportunities the board members are looking for. Opportunities for further governance enhancements. Again, this is what we recommend based on the feedback that we received from you, adopting a succession plan and talent oversight process that is continuous with regular updates, looking at the roles and responsibilities in light of shifting trends. How do we clarify? Do we make sure that everybody understands what they're responsible for? Engaging in communications across all levels, board member to board member, board to CEO, board to executive leadership, and stakeholders as well. looking at ways to give staff feedback on the board materials that need to be refined or could be refined further to give each board member an opportunity to focus on the key priorities. As I said, it is a tall order for directors in this environment. And so prioritizing that information and allowing more time for discussion is a key priority. And that involves the agenda setting process and focusing on those key priorities. The onboarding program, to maintain sustainability, there's an opportunity to consider assigning more tenured board members to newer ones, whether for mentoring purposes, maybe extending the onboarding program longer. But this is an important feedback that the newer board members were able to provide. Again, board leadership development, rotational opportunities, delegation. Oops. And finally, overseeing the CalPERS diversity profile to ensure that it remains a strategic asset, a strategic priority. Just a couple of observations. A number of board members raised culture as an important ingredient for enhancing board effectiveness. And I just wanted to bring to your attention the most recent Blue Ribbon Commission report that NACD issued last year. It's really an outstanding product. As members of NACD, all of you are able to download this report. And it really speaks to the importance of having culture as the foundation of all that involves board effectiveness and efficiencies. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And again, it's been very well received by other board members. I also wanted to highlight some of the courses that NACD is offering this year. I've customized the list based on the interests that were expressed by a number of board members during this process. You have full access to them by virtue of being members again. So please take a look, particularly great feedback on the certificate in cyber risk oversight has been very well received. Obviously ESG oversight, but you're all pros at that. But there may be some opportunities to take a look at what some of the other board members and boards are focusing on. Financial oversight course, technology. Of course, we have a NACD chapter in Northern California that all of you are welcome to participate. And you have a board advisor, Christina Hum. Any kind of question, any kind of information you need, please feel free to reach out to Christina. So you're to be commended on your commitment to continuous improvement as you continue to rise to higher levels of impact and growth. And again, this captures a point in time in your board evaluation. So you may have already identified many of these issues, but there may be other steps that you can take to continue on your journey to greater effectiveness. I thank you for the opportunity, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. The appendix, it's pretty much some background material doing further comparisons between 2021 and 2023 cycles. Any questions, comments, feedback?
That's what I'm waiting for from the board. Do we have any questions? Mr. Palkey.
Not so much a question, but just wanted to share. I recently went through the cybersecurity oversight program, and I spent my holiday season learning all about cybersecurity and all the fun technology stuff. But it was a great program. It's full of great information. I learned a lot, and I know I've been speaking frequently with Stevenson about what we do in our cybersecurity area and how we can improve
that aspect as we move forward here. So thank you for that program.
Great. Thank you.
So, and I want to thank you, Carrie. You did such a wonderful job on this and working with us. I know it's tough, especially wrangling us. I remember trying to get the last couple of people to do it. It's, yeah, we're like cats sometimes. I want to say that I kind of took pictures of a few of these because I think this would be very good for our board members, and I do have other commenters. As we get in the governance committee, talk about how we're going to construct the moving forward educational sessions to address these. So I'm really happy that we have these and that the board was candid about it so that we can address what everybody wants. So, and that's for a future meeting and me to talk to Matt about. So, but right now I've got Ms. Willette and then Mr. Pacheco.
Thank you. I don't have a question, just also a comment. I just want to say thank you for going through the process with us. I want to thank my colleagues on the board for being candid and also being earnest in this endeavor. And along the lines of, since it was brought up with the orientation, I'm going to try to tie this in. I want to say thank you to Mr. Bill McGrew for yesterday. A lot of the board members got a tour of the office and a welcome kind of piece. And so I think was fabulous. I think he was a phenomenal asset to our CalPERS organization. And I want to thank him for his 23 years of service and the rest of the team at CalPERS for making it a great place to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willette. Mr. Pacheco.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, President Taylor. First of all, I want to thank you for your presentation and all the information. I really found this really enlightening in terms of how we as a board can be more successful, more collaborative, more positive in the long run, because as you mentioned in your presentation, we are relatively a brand new board, many of us serving our first term and many of us also serving our first elected position. So I found the information quite useful. I also want to, just as a thought, last year I took one of the master courses in DEI, cybersecurity, and I believe on governance, and I found that to be really useful as a good basis of understanding material. And a question I have, I noticed on the form there was the NACD Directorship Certification Program. I believe it's the DC program. Can you elaborate more on that and what the utility of that with respect to our situation?
Certainly, Mr. Pacheco. It's a program that was launched about 3 years ago, and it's really an emphasis on elevating and making directors have a complete understanding. Oftentimes, directors, board members are assigned based on their expertise, based on the perspective, but this is a very comprehensive program that looks at every board member as a key contributor, not just based on their expertise, but based on all the issues that relate. So it's a very challenging program, very difficult to pass. A couple of fellow board members of mine have tried it on 2 or 3 occasions to make it, because it's very comprehensive. But it is a unique program. It's the only one that exists. As you know, NACD has been in business for close to 50 years. So we've been able to gather a lot of the intelligence that says, okay, what are the key fiduciary roles, and how can every board member learn and prepare for that. And so I highly recommend that program, that certification program, to be considered. But again, it's very time consuming, but well worth it.
Thank you for those comments. I appreciate that very, very much.
Ms. Gallegos.
Great. Thank you. It was very interesting. I didn't get to participate because I am, I think, the newest board member at this point. But it was very interesting to have the introspective. But I would request, though, is that we get more information on best practices. And in the future, I don't know if we can schedule, we talked about maybe having some additional fiduciary training, but learning what we could do better relative to best practices out in the industry.
So, and I think, thank you, Ms. Gallegos. I think that's part of our maybe ongoing education, and we'll address that through our governance committee. And I've got thoughts in my head about maybe a subcommittee or, So, and a question for you, Ms. Gallegos, did Ms. Cohen take this? I think she did, right?
I believe she did. Either her or Regina did. I know we participated because it was full participation.
Okay.
I wasn't the one giving the answer.
Got it.
Just wanted to acknowledge that.
Just making sure.
And if I may, President Taylor, I do think that the issues that you highlighted really speak to leading practices. Every board is now looking at CEO succession. Developing bench strength talent is a key priority. So whether you get an outside consultant to help you with the process, whether you have the internal resources, you really hit on the number one priority along with capital allocation. That is a leading concern and a leading practice in terms of how do we access those resources to be as effective as we possibly can.
In the future, yeah. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we feel this is very important, but our CEO is going nowhere right now.
No.
So, anyway, so I think I want to thank you both. Travis, thanks for also all the help for this, and we appreciate it. This is always a good exercise for us. Sometimes it's a little hard because I think people are like, ooh, I don't want to say anything, but we really appreciate it. So.
Madam.
Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Ruffino, I'm sorry. I opened the mic and then you're not there and I forgot.
Thank you, Madam President. Can I just do a quick follow-up on the previous question that Mr. Pacheco asked with respect to the director certification? Because frankly, I got attracted to that, especially when you said it's a very rigorous program. I love those rigorous programs. Yes. Challenges you. But then and that I could also be wrong. My perception was that it deals more with corporate world, and our board and our mission is somewhat different, and I was not really sure if it really would benefit in the long run. So I'm just trying to understand, because I got cold feet afterwards, and I thought, well, I don't think this is the best. There may be other ways where I can enhance, my preparation to be, or some other type of certification. Perhaps I was wrong. I'm not sure, but I'm wondering. I know you kind of touched upon a little bit, but do you think for us, public agency, government entity, I don't think that the focus of the program is directed at us. But like I said, I could be totally wrong.
No, you're absolutely right, Mr. Ruffino. The focus is not customized to public pension boards, to mutual funds. The principles are applicable, and they can be adapted to your type of board. The principles of governance, the principles of what are the key strategic priorities for a board, and strategy is risk, what's the risk appetite, and so a lot of those components, what are the external factors that constantly change, and how do we absorb that and deal with it? So it provides you with a broad sort of panoramic view of governance issues that relate to the role, fiduciary responsibilities of a board member. But you're absolutely right, it's not totally customized. It really captures, NACD has 23,000 members. We're very proud of having CalPERS as a board for a long, long time. CalPERS has been a long time member. In fact, we had Rich Copps, who was your general counsel. He was one of our board members for many years. Those perspectives get included, but it's more geared toward the broader concept based on court cases, state of Delaware, what are they focusing on, the kinds of things. So, but you're right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, Madam President, we can have a offline to explore a little bit more whether.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, because I think Melissa and I have discussed this as well. That sometimes these classes feel very not applicable to our roles. So yeah, we can discuss that offline for sure.
And may I, Madam President, also add, well, not add, but concur with Director Willett comment on yesterday's tour, an educational tour, part of the education. I want to thank the staff that accompany us, the security force. I felt like I was a CIA operative, up there. It was really cool to go around the buildings and see all the nice areas. And so thank you, staff. Thank you to the tour coordinator. I mean, he was great. And and I learned, by the way, quite a bit just by doing it. So maybe it's something that we might consider doing in the future, just for
earlier on in your tenure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Well, and we have another building you haven't seen, so
so
go
there's
visit
more to come.
our IT department and
I like it.
our
All right.
facilities and imaging and mail services.
Don't like to see people. Are you sure about that?
Yeah, I understand Dan was able to join for a little while to help host. So.
Yes, he was. Yeah, he did. So thank you, Madam President.
Absolutely.
And again, that's a leading practice as well, on site and just getting to meet the people is really helpful.
Yeah.
And a leading practice.
All right, so I want to thank you guys very much. This concludes our open session. Well, not completely, because I want to know if we have public comments. And I don't think there was any summary of committee direction, correct?
There's no specific board direction, but I think it's more working with the president, vice president, who are also the chair and vice chair of governance, of how to do the follow-up on the self-assessment.
And I think we should. I wrote down some ideas. So yeah, we probably should, so that we can get it on the next governance committee. So thank you very much. And of course, I accidentally closed out my open session. Let me go back. And that was it. So yes, if there's no public comment, we are going to recess into closed session after a 15-minute break. So we will be back at 11:15 in closed session to address items 1 through 3, which will include Liu versus CalPERS, Los Angeles County Superior Court case number, and I'm not going to read it for you. We will also receive the General Counsel's update on pending litigation, and then after closed session, we will reconvene in open session. So thank you very much. Good morning still. This adjourns the Board of Administration meeting, and we will, for this month, and the next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, April 16th, 2024. We will see everyone then. Thank you all very much.